How'd you choose her as a subject?
I had interviewed a lot of women trying to decide, because I thought the book should be one family, and I wanted to focus on one family and tell their story. So I was looking for one, and I interviewed several people through these contacts that I had. And this woman, the one that Odessa Williams, the one I ended up writing about, was just a wonderful and warm and open woman. She had a large family, and she was the matriarch of the family from her kids, her grandkids, and her great-grandkids. She held the whole family together. She had a couple daughters who had gotten into drugs. She had a son in prison. She had other kids who were doing fine and working at really good jobs, but she also took in her grandkids because their mothers had basically abandoned them or gotten into drugs. So I thought she was perfect because she really embodied a lot of issues, crime, drugs, violence, welfare, health care. She had huge problems with that. So I thought through her I could just show some of the problems that people have in her situation, and how the system dealt with her, because she dealt with the healthcare system, the welfare system, the police, crime, drugs, and all of that through her life. So, and as I say, I ended up settling on her because she was so warm and so open, and willing to let me actually, basically move. I didn't move in with her, but to spend every single day with her is what I did.
How did you observe her?
I spent every day with her.
Pickings?
I went with her everywhere. I just spent every day with her for about 6 months. I would go to her house, every morning, and we would go out, and I would do whatever she did. I said, "Don't let me influence you. I just want to be here, and whatever you're doing today, I want to go with you." So I just went everywhere. She let me see everything. All her fights with her kids, all kind of family dramas. When she went trash picking, she went out to neighborhoods and stuff that people put out for trash, she would find amazing things. I went to health care. She had huge problems with health, taking her kids back and forth to the doctor, to public clinics. I would go with her when she had problems with the welfare system. She would have to go down to the welfare office and deal with problems she had. A lot of what she dealt with was money, just trying to have enough money to get through the month to pay the light bill and the heat bill. Coming up with sources of income. She would go fishing and cook fish and sell it, to her neighbors. She had just all kind of ways to come up with money, and I just went along with her when she was doing that.
Do you still stay in contact with her?
Yeah, up until the last, I haven't talked to her in about a year or so, but I call her and just keep up with her. And after the book came out, I was in touch with her pretty regularly. And she's still in Philadelphia. She's moved out of the house that she was in, but she's still doing all right, and she is still taking in kids. As a foster mother, you get paid, so much a month to take in kids in the foster care system, and she's still doing that. And she was doing that when I was following her, and she's still doing it and raising her own great grandkids.
Did your opinion on welfare evolve and change during the process of writing the book?
It did. I didn't know that much about welfare. I knew about the stereotypes of lazy people who abused the system and didn't want to find work, and I found that for the most part that wasn't true. I did find, obviously, there were certain people who did abuse the system. One of her daughters, there was a huge tension between her and, one of her granddaughters, who had been on welfare and kept having kids by different men, would not even think about going to school or trying to get a job, and felt that she had a right to welfare. But on the other hand, almost, a high percentage of other people I talked to were out looking for work. Most of them did have work. The first thing about welfare requirements is that if you had a job, you'd lose your welfare, so there was no incentive to go out and get a job. So people worked under the table. They had to find jobs because welfare wasn't enough to survive on, so they would get jobs under the table and not report it. So I was able to see just some of the holes in the welfare system, and the fact that it did create a sense of entitlement for some people. For others, like Odessa, it wasn't nearly enough. And she spent so much of her time dealing with the bureaucracy because there were so many rules. And the other problem was people, would want to work and want to find work, but would lose their welfare if they reported it. And one thing I did find is people really did want to work. Most of the people on welfare that I talked to would much rather have been working than getting welfare. The other issue that came up was child care, because there was so much involved with child care and so much time spent with that. It was hard to go out and get a job. And I thought that a better way to have welfare was not to give people money, but to provide them child care and to provide health care and provide all the necessities of life so that people could go out and at least find part-time jobs and support themselves as long as all these other issues were taken care of.
Another one of your key works was being Black in the South. What inspires you to write this piece?
This was when I was based in South Africa for the Philadelphia paper. I was there for 4 years, and it was right during the state of emergency under apartheid, which the government was really obviously under threat, the apartheid government, from the masses. I mean, it was a tiny minority of whites trying to control a huge majority of blacks. And there were, uprisings in the townships, the black townships. I was totally segregated. And my editor and I decided that it would be interesting to see what life was like in the townships, because nobody was really reporting it. There were all kind of censorship laws under South Africa that you couldn't write about emergency situations, you couldn't write about police actions, all these things you supposedly couldn't write about. So you rarely saw coverage of day-to-day life under the state of emergency. So I decided to go out and profile, ended up being 9 people, different people, to show what it was like being black under the state of emergency and under apartheid. And I spent several months just following these people around a lot. The same way I did with Odessa Williams, I would just get out with those people and spend time with them. That was an unusual situation because a white American in the townships definitely stood out. And, but I found people were amazingly open, amazingly willing to talk, particularly to an American, because at that time there were sanctions on South Africa. So America was seen as a little bit of a savior because of our policy against apartheid. And the press, they realized that, particularly the international press, was one way to get their story out and keep the pressure on the government. So people were exceptionally willing to talk to me and spend time with me.
And why did you decide to do multiple subjects for this piece?
I thought that one person, if I just did a profile on one person or one family, that wouldn't really tell the story. I wanted to get sort of all aspects of apartheid. I had a guy that was basically an underground worker. I don't call him a worker. He was an activist, a person that had been in jail and was being chased by the secret police and was living underground and trying to organize against apartheid. I spent a lot of time with him to show that side of things. I interviewed and spent time with one guy who was a black counselor because the apartheid government had tried to set up separate black ruling communities and councils that were seen as illegitimate by most blacks, and these people were seen as sellouts to the white government. But I wanted to see what it was like from their point of view. So I spent time with one guy like that. I spent time with a family that had moved out of the townships into a government-sponsored black living area that wasn't a township, that was supposed to be nicer, and got into all the conflicts he had with the people he left behind in the township, the criticism he got for it, his relationship with whites. I did one story was on a mother whose kids were activists and were in and out of prison, and she spent every day going to prison, trying to get her kids out, trying to bring them food, hiring lawyers, just to show what it was like, how apartheid affected families. So I just tried to get the whole situation to try to describe just what it was like to be black in all its permutations under apartheid.